Breaking news that has shaken the gospel community to its core at 66, Bishop Drew Sheard was rushed to the hospital under alarming circumstances. The man who has led thousands through faith and hope is now fighting a battle most of us never saw coming. What happened behind closed doors that led to this shocking moment? And why are some insiders saying this could change everything we thought we knew about his health and leadership? You won't believe what happened next. The news of Bishop Drew Sheard's sudden hospitalization has sent shockwaves across the gospel world. Known for his powerful sermons, unwavering leadership, and deep influence in the Church of God in Christ, Bishop Sheard has always appeared larger-than-life, untouchable, even. But behind the scenes, things were far more fragile than anyone imagined. In this video, we'll uncover the untold story of what led to this shocking emergency. From rare insider details about his recent health struggles, to the moments that left his family and church community in disbelief, and even whispers about decisions that could impact the future of his ministry, nothing is off limits. You won't believe the personal challenges, the tense hospital moments, and the shocking revelations we've uncovered. By the end of this story, you'll see Bishop Sheard in a completely new light and understand why this moment has the entire faith community holding its breath. This is where it gets unbelievable. But before we dive in, take a moment to reflect. How often do we realize that even the strongest leaders face battles no one sees? Keep watching, because the next part will reveal exactly what happened that fateful day. And it's more intense than anyone expected. It was an ordinary morning, or so it seemed. Bishop Drew Sheard, the 66-year-old spiritual leader known for his commanding presence and inspirational sermons, began to feel an unsettling weakness. At first, those around him thought it was fatigue, a natural consequence of his relentless schedule of ministry, meetings, and family commitments. But by midday, the situation escalated. His family noticed that something wasn't right. A close source revealed that he complained of severe chest pains and dizziness, prompting immediate concern. In the blink of an eye, what began as a typical day turned into a medical emergency. Ambulances were called, and Bishop Sheard was rushed to the hospital, leaving staff, family, and congregants in stunned silence. What made this moment even more alarming was the speed at which it unfolded. Those closest to him said there was no warning, no prior hospitalization, no apparent symptoms that could have predicted this sudden crisis. It was a stark reminder that even those who seem untouchable are human, and life can change in a heartbeat. Inside the hospital, doctors scrambled to stabilize him. Reports suggest that Bishop Sheard underwent several urgent tests, while loved ones waited anxiously for updates. The faith community outside the hospital grew restless, sharing prayers, messages, and videos, all wondering the same thing. What was happening to a man who had always been the rock for so many? But this was only the beginning, because what the doctors discovered next left even the medical team shocked. A revelation that would challenge assumptions and raise serious questions about his health and future. And that discovery would set the stage for the decisions that could change the course of his ministry forever. While the world saw Bishop Drew Sheard as a powerhouse of faith, charisma, and leadership, those closest to him knew that the last few months had not been easy. Sources inside his inner circle have revealed that he had been quietly dealing with health issues that were rarely spoken of publicly. Friends and family say he had been experiencing fatigue, elevated blood pressure, and recurring chest discomfort. But in true Sheard fashion, he kept pushing forward, attending church events, mentoring young ministers, and leading services with the same energy and passion he always had. Some insiders even say he would joke about needing a heavenly boost to get through the week, masking just how serious things had become. What made the situation even more concerning was the sheer secrecy. Bishop Sheard was determined not to let his congregation or the public worry. Only a handful of family members and close advisors knew the extent of his condition. Yet, behind the smiles and sermons, the tension was growing. Nurses and staff who had occasional contact with him noticed subtle signs: shortness of breath after walking short distances, occasional dizziness, and the faintest signs of fatigue during meetings that usually energized him. Even within the church administration, there were hushed conversations about whether Bishop Sheard should slow down, take time off, or even delegate more responsibilities. But the man who had carried generations of believers through triumphs and trials wasn't ready to step back. "He is a fighter," one insider admitted. But sometimes, even fighters need to be reminded that their own health comes first. Then came the day of the emergency. Witnesses describe it as sudden and jarring, a day that started like any other but quickly became a scene of fear and uncertainty. Staffers rushed to his side, family members were called in frantically, and the call for an ambulance seemed surreal. For many who had seen him as untouchable, this was a moment that humanized the bishop in the most profound way. But here's the twist: what the doctors found during those urgent tests left everyone in shock. Some details have only now come to light, revealing a struggle that went far beyond normal health concerns. This revelation was not only a personal crisis, but also a pivotal moment for the church, raising questions that nobody was ready to answer. And that's when whispers started circulating. Whispers that suggested Bishop Sheard's hospitalization could impact not only his health, but the future leadership of the church, and perhaps even change how his family and congregation viewed his role. The implications were bigger than anyone could have imagined. When Bishop J. Drew Sheard arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere was tense, almost surreal. Ambulance sirens had already drawn a crowd outside, and inside, medical staff were preparing for the unexpected. Family members, friends, and close aides were ushered into waiting rooms, their faces etched with worry, their minds racing with questions. Inside, doctors acted swiftly. Monitors beeped constantly as they ran tests to assess the severity of his condition. The diagnosis, though cautiously shared, sent waves of fear through everyone present. While specific details remain private, sources confirm that the medical team was alarmed by complications that could have turned life-threatening within hours. Meanwhile, the news leaked in fragments to the public. Social media erupted with speculation, prayers, and viral messages of support. Fans, congregants, and gospel artists flooded platforms with words of encouragement, creating a digital prayer chain that spanned across the country. Yet amid the public display of concern, the true intensity of the hospital moments remained hidden, the quiet, tense hours where family members whispered, prayed aloud, and held vigil beside his bedside. Those who were there describe moments that felt like eternity. At one point, the bishop reportedly drifted in and out of consciousness. A family member shared that he murmured words of reassurance to those around him, telling them not to worry, even as the medical team debated treatment options. It was a glimpse of the strength and humility that defined him, a man accustomed to leading thousands, now relying on the prayers and support of those closest to him. And yet, just when hope seemed fragile, a breakthrough came. Doctors administered treatments and interventions that stabilized him, but the relief was cautious. Everyone understood that this was only the first battle, that recovery would require time, rest, and careful monitoring. Outside the hospital walls, the news of his condition sparked wider conversations. Church members, colleagues, and fellow bishops expressed shock and concern. Many reflected on the sacrifices that leaders like Bishop Sheard make, often at the expense of their own well-being. Social media was filled with comments like, "He's always been there for us, now it's our turn to lift him up in prayer." Yet despite the immediate relief, an unsettling question lingered. How had it come to this? How could a man known for his vitality and dedication face such a sudden health crisis? And more importantly, what did this mean for the future of his ministry, his family, and the congregation that depended on his guidance? As his condition stabilized, insiders began revealing details about the hidden pressures he faced, the relentless schedule, the weight of spiritual responsibility, and the personal sacrifices that had quietly piled up over decades. These revelations painted a picture of a leader who was human after all, someone whose strength was profound, yet vulnerable in ways few could see. But the story doesn't end there, because even as Bishop Sheard began his recovery, another challenge emerged, a private struggle that could redefine how the community sees him, and perhaps even shift the course of his legacy. After the intense hours in the hospital, Bishop J. Drew Sheard was moved to a private recovery suite. The atmosphere shifted from sheer panic to cautious optimism, but for those closest to him, the tension remained. Family members stayed by his side, offering support, words of encouragement, and quiet prayers. Friends and aides described the scene as both intimate and deeply emotional, a rare glimpse into the private life of a man usually seen leading from the pulpit. During those days of recovery, insiders reveal that Bishop Sheard reflected deeply on his life, his choices, and the heavy responsibilities he had carried for decades. People who spoke with him during this period said he was surprisingly candid about his vulnerabilities. For a man who had often been seen as a pillar of unshakable faith, he openly acknowledged that the human body and spirit have limits even for those who dedicate themselves entirely to serving others. His family, too, felt the weight of the situation. Loved ones recounted sleepless nights, moments of fear, and prayers whispered through tears. Some admitted they had been unaware of just how serious his condition had become until that fateful day. The hospitalization, while shocking, brought a profound moment of clarity for everyone around him, a reminder that even spiritual giants are human, and that health is a treasure not to be taken for granted. Meanwhile, the church community struggled with the news. Congregants, pastors, and fellow bishops expressed concern, sending messages and creating networks of prayer. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #Pray for Bishop Sheard and #FaithStrong, showing just how many lives he had touched over the years. But there were also whispers of concern about the future, who would step in to handle leadership responsibilities if his recovery took longer than expected. How would the church navigate this sudden uncertainty? Amidst these challenges, Bishop Sheard began to make small but meaningful decisions about his life and ministry. Insiders suggest that he discussed delegating some duties, focusing on personal health, and mentoring the next generation of church leaders more closely. These were unprecedented steps for someone who had carried so much on his own for so long. Yet, even in recovery, he remained determined to inspire and lead. Reports indicate that he used this period to write notes of encouragement to staff, hold private counseling sessions with emerging ministers, and pray with those who visited him in the hospital. Every small action seemed to carry a message. Strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising even when life shakes you to your core. But there was one revelation that stunned everyone who knew him, a private insight into his own fears and hopes that had never been shared publicly before. According to close family and aides, Bishop Sheard admitted that this hospitalization had changed him. It had made him more reflective, more aware of mortality, and more committed to ensuring that his legacy was not only spiritual, but also personal, focused on family, well-being, and long-term guidance for his congregation. This chapter of his life, sudden hospitalization, emotional turmoil, and quiet reflection marked a turning point. It was a moment where faith met fragility, where leadership met vulnerability, and where a man who had guided thousands had to confront his own limitations. And as Bishop Sheard slowly regained his strength, a pressing question remained. How would this experience shape the next chapter of his ministry? Would he return with the same intensity, or would the lessons learned in those hospital rooms redefine his approach to life, faith, and leadership forever? The answers to these questions are beginning to surface, and what they reveal is as surprising as it is inspiring, showing a bishop who is not just a leader, but a human being navigating trials that many of us will never face. Once Bishop J. Drew Sheard began to regain strength, the ripple effects of his hospitalization became increasingly evident. The moment had left an indelible mark not just on his family and close aides, but on the entire church community and beyond. Social media posts, interviews with fellow ministers, and countless personal testimonies painted a picture of a leader whose influence extended far beyond the pulpit and whose vulnerability reminded everyone of the human side of faith. Family members described the aftermath as a period of intense reflection. They had watched him, the man who had always been the unwavering rock, suddenly confronted with fragility. One family member revealed that the bishop shared private fears, admitted he had neglected his own health for decades, and expressed a newfound commitment to balance ministry with personal well-being. These admissions were unprecedented, revealing a side of the man that few had ever seen. For the church, the event sparked discussions about leadership succession, delegation of responsibilities, and the importance of health awareness within ministry. Pastors and congregants alike were forced to confront a truth that had long been overlooked. Even the strongest leaders cannot carry the weight of an entire community alone. According to insiders, several key church leaders were called in to reassess operations, ensure continuity, and support Bishop Sheard during his recovery, a testament to both his impact and the reliance of the community on his guidance. Public reaction was immediate and powerful. Support poured in from across the nation and beyond, with fellow gospel artists, church leaders, and fans sending messages of encouragement. Online platforms were flooded with posts reflecting gratitude for his guidance and concern for his well-being. Hashtags like #Pray for Bishop Sheard and #FaithStrong trended in multiple communities, showing the depth of influence he had cultivated over decades. But amid the outpouring of support, there were also whispers of concern and speculation. How serious was his health really? Would this experience force him to step back permanently from leadership? Could his ministry survive a shift in focus, or would it transform into something entirely new? These questions added a layer of tension that kept the gospel community anxiously waiting for answers. Meanwhile, Bishop Sheard's own perspective was evolving. Close aides describe a man who emerged from this trial with a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. He began to prioritize mentoring young ministers, advocating for the importance of health and wellness among clergy, and ensuring that his family remained at the center of his life. In interviews and private meetings, he spoke candidly about how the experience had reshaped his understanding of leadership. It wasn't just about guiding others, but also about taking care of oneself to sustain that guidance. Yet, even with this clarity, there was an underlying tension, the realization that life is unpredictable, even for someone as disciplined and devoted as Bishop Sheard. Many within the church reflected on how quickly circumstances can change and how fragile life truly is. Messages poured in reminding leaders, members, and followers alike to value health, cherish loved ones, and never take time for granted. And while Bishop Sheard's recovery was progressing, a new question emerged that would continue to dominate conversations. What next steps would he take for his ministry? Would he continue at the same pace that had defined his decades of leadership, or would he embrace a new approach, shaped by this life-altering experience?